wonderful to see you. I'm Mimi Bliss. I am class of 1988, and I live and work in Nashville, Tennessee. And my volunteer gig is I'm a vice president on the Alumni Board of Directors. So I have the honor of sort of talking to alumni from across the country and representing alumni and learning more about what you're interested in. We have been doing focus groups recently around a sense of belonging and what that means for alumni as well as families and friends to have a sense of belonging with the university and sort of that instant bond and connection. One of the topics that comes up unprompted is people ask about what's happening with Duke and Durham and what's happening with the community, and there's a lot of interest. So this is really timely today. I am delighted to introduce our moderator for today's program, President Vincent Price. President Price is the 10th president of Duke University. He is also the Walter Hines Page Professor of Public Policy and Political Science, and that is both in the Sanford School of Public Policy and Trinity College of Arts and Sciences. President Price is a leading global expert on public opinion, social influence, and political communication. He joined Duke in 2017. And since he has come here, he has looked forward into the future of the university. And I know from my perspective, sort of thinking about what's the next 100 years is really exciting and kind of just a wonderful opportunity. And there's a strategic vision that focuses on 5 principles and provides context for what we'll talk about today. The first is empowering people, the boldest leaders and thinkers. The second is transforming education. That's teaching and learning. Third is building community, and that's on campus, and you'll learn more about that later today. Fourth is forging partnerships, a lot of what you'll talk about in this program. And fifth is engaging a global network of alumni, which is the folks in this room and everyone who's on campus now and beyond. And if you look at some of the major initiatives since he came in 2017, they've fallen into those areas. There's a comprehensive commitment to racial equity, this building, the continued strategic commitment and advancement of the arts, the next generation residential programs, the Bricks to Stone program after this would be a piece of that, and the Quadex, investing in Duke science and technology, and broadening and deepening engagement with Durham and the surrounding region. Please help me in welcoming President Price.
Thanks, Mimi, and thank you all for joining us here today. I look forward to this wonderful conversation. It's not that Stelfanie or I miss opportunities to talk, but to have a chance to talk a bit about where we are now, where we're headed with Durham and our engagement with Durham, and then to talk with all of you about our ambitions, our goals. I look forward to this very much. Let me also say thank you to Jen Chambers and Joe Supernoff for putting together the program today, and to Trevor Schoonmaker for hosting us here at the Nasher. What an extraordinary gem this is really for, not just for Duke, but for the entire community. And if you haven't seen Spirited in the Land, you must do so during your time here. So thank you, Trevor, for hosting us. It's a joy to be joined in conversation today with our Vice President for Durham and Community Affairs, Stelfanie Williams, who is a Duke alumna and is celebrating her own 25th reunion at this reunions weekend. She leads our efforts to engage and partner with our community and more broadly throughout the region, including Durham, but also Carteret County, for example, where we have our marine laboratory. And she has worked to advance and launch our strategic community impact plan, which is a plan built around not the things that Duke wants to do with Durham, certainly not what we want to do to Durham, but things that Durham, our neighbors in Durham, tell us they want to achieve, and then builds the idea of partnership around how we can make advances in areas related to affordable and available housing, early childhood development, making sure that we have adequate supply of healthy nutrition and advanced public health, make sure that we're investing in workforce readiness and college readiness at a time when our economy is really heating up and there's tremendous opportunity if we can get out in front of those opportunities to come. And also how we can build a much more vibrant nonprofit community here and serve as an important anchor institution for the region. She's also leading efforts to better align our research and educational missions with those partnerships. And I've just been so impressed by the way that Stelfanie has engaged with leaders in the office of the provost and deans across the campus to make sure that we're really leveraging all the resources we have. So before returning to Duke, Stelfanie pursued an impressive career in higher education. She was the president of Vance Granville Community College, and in 2018 was named President of the Year by the North Carolina State Board of Community Colleges. So she is a celebrated institutional leader and brings those skills with her. In addition to her undergraduate degree that she did here at Duke in public policy and Spanish, she received a master's degree in project management from Western Carolina, and she earned her doctorate in education from NC State, where she was recognized with the IE Ready Distinguished Leadership Award in 2014 and honored among distinguished alumni in 2019. So Stelfanie brings to Duke a tremendous amount of experience. I've been the beneficiary of that experience, and I am delighted to welcome Stelfanie Williams to the stage, where we'll turn to a conversation. So to get started, this is the reunion event for you, not just because you're part of a moderated conversation, but because you're celebrating your 25th anniversary. So I guess I'll start by asking you to think about your own experiences as a student at Duke and how you see things having changed since then.
Well, I first must say that this feels great to be here in this room and in this group. I've spent much of my life and time in places where front porches have a lot of currency, and this feels like a front porch conversation today. And just observing all that's already happened across reunion weekend, it reminds me really of what is great about Duke. There's this synergistic quality to Duke that I found as a student. Really thinking about the rigor of the academic environment here and how it's coupled with a nurturing and supportive student experience. And then to even think about the sort of teamwork we see in our athletic environments. All of this, to me, reflects that critical synergy that's special about Duke. And it also encompasses sort of the local environment and culture along with the global influences and representation we have here at the institution, that sense of interdisciplinary work together. And that's what I recall. That's what was so great about my time as a student. I actually wasn't here a very long time. I'm glad that the class of '98 adopted me, but I was here 3 years. And as some young adults do, I was very future-oriented and sort of forward-thinking and ready for the next step and really interested in things beyond the campus. And so those 3 years really flew by, but I felt prepared to go out and really enter public service. And part of what really interests me in coming back to Duke is the opportunity to really be a part of bridging our campus and the communities. And it's really exciting to see. And I think today, as I look at Duke from where I sit now, it is so encouraging that I think that synergy, we are much more inclined to view that inclusive of things beyond the campus. And it goes two ways. I mean, I think about even some of the activities for this reunion weekend, like the bus tour in Durham, and we all can see the transformation that has happened in downtown Durham, and Duke, was a part of that. But also even here at Nasher, this beautiful museum that we're in, named after the Nasher family in 2005. And just last year, I was talking with Trevor and his team about this. They switched to eliminating the admission. And as a result of that, have seen almost a 43% increase, I believe, in the visits. And so just that real orientation to thinking about how do we include excellence in all its forms, and how do we further blur the lines between campus and community? So
I was a recent arrival to Duke, spending time with your predecessor, Phil Wynn. And it's one of those moments when a senior member of your leadership team comes in and says, I'm going to retire. And of course, it inspires panic immediately. You think, oh my gosh, how could we live without Phil? But it presents an opportunity to take an office, an established office, bring new leadership, and develop it, turn it in some new directions, expand it. So you were one of the first to join my vice presidential leadership team at Duke. And I've just admired what you've done since you've arrived. But perhaps it would be helpful to talk a little bit about the history of that office of Durham and Community Affairs and how you see it having grown and developed over time.
So about 3 decades ago, largely across the country, institutions, private institutions foremost, really were in an era of what's been described as enlightened self-interest. And that's when a number of civic and community engagement activities were formalized at institutions like ours. You think about, as we were turning into the 90s, the establishment of the Community Service Center here at Duke, Heart Leadership Program in my school, the Sanford School, and even the Duke-Durham Neighborhood Partnership, which serves as the predecessor to our office, all emerged during that period of time. And the Duke-Durham Neighborhood Partnership was particularly instrumental because I think it was a significant moment for Duke to really go and have conversations and interface with our neighbors and to really say, we want to hear what your interests are and how Duke can be a good neighbor. And that principle-based approach to partnership has persisted. So, you see through the mid-90s, the development of the Duke-Durham Neighborhood Partnership. It was originally 12 neighborhoods around Duke. It now includes 14 neighborhoods because we've had 2 neighborhoods since I've been here asked to be a part of those activities. And that neighborhood partnership continues to be fundamental to the work we do and really pushed the university toward partnership in the 90s. And then by the 2000s, we see Phil was hired as the inaugural VP for what was then called Durham and Regional Affairs. We're now Durham Community Affairs. He brought in such a commitment to education, really an education champion, and was able to overlay in that neighborhood partnership zone a lot of educational partnerships and the work that we do now with Durham Public Schools and other community-based educational entities. And then, upon my arrival in 2018, we took a fresh look at how our group, how our work could meet the current needs of both communities and our university colleagues and how to strengthen those partnerships. And we started that work with community conversations, really examining the history and trying to identify some core areas where we could have meaningful and measurable impact over time. And that's really where those 5 strategic priority areas that you referenced, Vince, came from. But it really has been a progression. And I'm very excited with the strategic framework of the university now and our efforts to aim toward purposeful partnerships. I think we have a lot of promise before us in working with communities.
And one of the things that I asked you to do, Stelfanie, maybe not broadly recognized, but Duke University is both Duke University and Duke University Health System. And a lot of the community's understanding of Duke centers around Duke Health and Duke Health Affairs, but we're almost like 2 separate entities and understood to be separate entities. We're a large and complicated place. People find many doors into and out of Duke. So the charge to you was to think about how we could take all of this, be more integrative in our thinking, formally integrate Duke Health Community Affairs into your office, but then also connect across the campus and for people inside the university to think of your office as a place, a door to the community where they could, before they jump out and start doing things, lean on you, understand what's already happening, do better work. And for those outside the university to have a single place where they could go. So talk me through how you've gone about doing that, because it to me, it feels, revolutionary is too strong a word, but a very different, functionally different office today than it was 5 years ago. So how have you gone about that meeting that challenge that I threw down to you when you came?
Well, it's certainly a challenge. You know, the university is so wide and deep, and it can be tough for our neighbors and our partners to navigate. And so we do see an important function of our office being to facilitate that. And I sort of mentioned this front porch when we started, but that really is a metaphor to me of how our office can be viewed. And it's twofold. It's both about the integration within the institution, which is key. And what we are looking at is how we can partner internally as much as we think about partnership externally, and doing that through the core enterprises of the institution. So, you know, we've started now with the health system because that is a significant area where a lot of our residents engage with Duke. And we have built together a collaboration between my office and the chancellor's office, really working across the institution in alignment on engagement. And the intent is to really do that as well with our academic area, working with the provost office and several colleagues in that shop to really think about how we better integrate with the core mission of the institution, teaching, learning, and research, how we support scholarship, our faculty and students, and opportunities for service and learning. And then, of course, really thinking about that operational side of Duke, which is often where there's touch points with our neighbors and with local government, and talking with the administrative groups across the campus about how we can better weave together the work of community affairs with the operational aspects of the institution. So that's really the internal piece of it. And I think it's so important, if we're going to really sustain our efforts, that we really integrate those activities together. And I think prior to us sort of moving in this direction, our office was really more of an extension and largely externally facing. But I really think that we're at a moment where we can bring to bear the assets of the institution, Pan Duke, and really blend those with the assets that are beyond the campus. But on the community side, it's also been very important for us to think about how we show up and how we help bridge purposeful partnerships. And in my view, there are three elements to that. First, really thinking about impact. You know, how can we measure success and do that with our community partners? And so we've started strategic councils around these focus areas, trying to have a collective table where we can hear from community partners and try to identify common interest, areas where we can have coalition and sort of collective impact. So that impact is key. Goodwill is important. Sometimes our best intentions don't get us where we're trying to. And so thinking about what success looks like, shared and mutual benefit, that's one. The second thing really is around equitable relationships. So again, starting by listening to our community partners, you know, really thinking about how we can find the confluence of the mission of the missions of the university and the interest of community partners. And then, of course, I would say the sustainable element is vital. Universities are so time-bound. Students are here for a period of time. Projects are funded for a period of time. Interests change. And so I hope that our office functions to support both colleagues and community partners in sustaining those partnerships, being that wraparound from the beginning, trying to identify and match good relationships and provide the kind of professional development and supports throughout the project, really helping to problem solve and to think about how this aligns with the goals that we've heard from community partners. And as projects end, really thinking about how we maintain those relationships and how we build on those into the future. So we've been, I think, for the first time, maybe looking both externally and internally at how we can be much more effective at forging those purposeful partnerships.
Yeah. I mentioned this to you, but I'll mention it to the group that in those early years, I spent a lot of my time when I'd hear from people with interest in connecting to the Durham community. Well, make sure have you talked to Stelfanie? Check in with Stelfanie's office. A lot of encouragement. Now, and this is just a few years later, I had lunch with a member of our faculty who's working on a Data Plus project. These are projects where we work with outside clients. They have data, they need analysts to help them. And he had been doing some work with the school district and was excited to expand and maybe create an internship with the school district. And I was just getting ready to say, have you talked to Stelfanie? He said, and we've been working with Stelfanie's office and she has been fantastic. And I just love to see that, the way that your profile within Duke is elevated. Students mentioned contact with your office, and this is new and different because you have brought together the community, and they understand that you're able to create more impact by being the first stop before people go out. Because there are a lot of good intentions, but we could stir the ocean if we have a lot of small things happening here and there. I'm curious now. You're 5 years into this. Do you feel anything has changed with respect to Durham relations, Duke and Durham? Where are things trending? Give me a sense of what you learned over those 5 years, and if things feel the same to you or perhaps different at this juncture.
So as I approach 5 years, it's really interesting that half of it has been during a pandemic environment. And not only sort of the exercise of going through that with community partners, but also the lingering effects of that and how it shows up both in our work and also in communities. I am really proud of the relationship that continues to develop with our Durham leaders. There's been a lot of change in leadership in Durham, as we've seen across the country. We have, since I've been here, new mayor, new school board chair, new county commissioners chair, new police chief, lots of change in the external environment. But I am really pleased that what I think we've been able to do is to build relationships that last and that are ongoing beyond the folks that occupy those spaces, and to ensure that folks know that we are here and wanting to be a good faith partner. It's sort of like, I don't know, maybe a marriage or a relationship. It's a persistent activity that we have to attend to, managing those relationships and honoring our commitments to community. And I'm glad that I think we're at a good space, but it is ongoing work and something that we have to be faithful to all the time.
And you mentioned the pandemic. I would agree there was a high degree of collaboration and coordination between Duke, the city, the county. Some funds were put together to help small businesses, and I know there were grant and loan programs put together at a time when the faculty was very nervous about bringing students back to campus in that fall of 20. One of the most persuasive arguments we were able to make is that this is something Durham wants and needs to help those small businesses stay in business. And it worked out. Not that it was easy, but it worked out reasonably well. And there was a high degree of collaboration. And I will say that the partnerships that solidified with the county and the city over that period of time have helped us.
Yeah.
Even though it has put such strain on the community, has been such a difficult thing for so very many people. if I look around at other parts of the country and the fissures that were created and the problems that were created and the depth of the challenges that they face coming out of the pandemic, I would say that the city leadership and the regional leadership did well. A good example of a lot of purposeful partnership.
Definitely, but I have to thank you and the leadership of the institution for being willing to, in a very quick fashion, say that we are going to commit locally resources, time, energy. And you mentioned the small business program, which was a connection with the city. So many Duke folks were working remotely. In a typical pre-COVID environment, we had about 4,000 employees in downtown Durham. Most of those folks were home. And so we heard from the businesses, particularly surrounding Duke, that they needed help. And we wanted to be helpful. And so joining with the city and the county, we were able to put together a loan and grants program that really helped those businesses endure. But that was just one example. I mean, there were folks all across the institution that worked with colleagues in our office to do things, whether it was health related and trying to work on vaccinations and PPE, to housing issues like shelters. I mean, you can imagine the shelters that were trying to accommodate folks and social distancing. And we were trying to be a good partner to help them plan and orient and resource up. And it was a hard time, but it was a great opportunity to really dig in, I think, and rally together for community.
Yeah. So none of this work is easy. It's all very important. Talk a little bit about some of the challenges you faced internally, externally. What have been the challenges and how have you tried to navigate through them?
I think the significant challenges that come to mind externally, one, if you travel through downtown Durham, it's clear the transformation that has happened around commercial economic development, and yet the economic opportunity is still somewhat uneven in Durham. And in my observation, often it's native Durhamites who feel like they aren't able to access the economic opportunities that are coming through large employers and the development that's happening. And so for us, we're thinking about not only what are those strategic partnerships that are about economic development, but how do we ensure that there's access and equity and that we work with those organizations that are reaching those who are most under-resourced. So again, folks are able to really be a part of the new Durham as it takes shape. So striking that balance between what we all want to see in terms of the development and the beauty and the new amenities in Durham, but also recognizing that we want that opportunity to be available to everyone, and particularly those who have been here and sort of have a legacy and history in Durham. There are lingering challenges too that were only exacerbated by COVID. I mean, I think about these priorities that the community expressed to us and that are reflected in the Strategic Community Impact Plan, and food security challenges are escalating. And it's not just for Durham, it's internationally, but particularly here in this region, we're still trying to figure out how to work on those issues and how do we help be a good partner around housing affordability when the market in Durham is so different than when I was a student, than when our office began. Folks that were here and doing this work and who are still doing it with me tell me that at that time, people were excited for any development. And now it's a different time. I mean, we really have to be thoughtful and we have to be sensitive to how we show up and how we do the work of partnering around issues like housing. We have employees that we're interested in making sure that we're taking good care of, as well as those who are just good neighbors.
And housing is an interesting challenge for us all to face, but these are all interrelated. Mm-hmm. So the focus on college and career readiness, as I view it, is really about making investments in the communities already here so that when economic activity comes, you won't see an in-migration of job seekers taking those jobs, but it becomes a vehicle for economic progress for Durhamites and others who have been here for a very long time. But that takes a deep level of an investment, and it's a challenge to put together. It does take partnerships with other institutions, Durham Tech, for example. So how has your office been working with the Department of Public Schools and with Durham Tech and other entities to try to seed activities along those lines?
So interestingly enough, I was in a meeting this morning with Durham Tech colleagues and Durham Public Schools colleagues and folks from the city and county talking about one example of a program that we're working on. It's an academic practice partnership, and it's really around nursing. And if you have been paying attention, you can see that we really have a nursing shortage, not just at Duke. This is a national issue, but in the city of Medicine, we want to ensure that we are working together to provide those pathways for students, but also to think about how we can maintain the high quality healthcare that we provide here at Duke. So as an example, we're working now on a partnership with Durham Tech, the community college, and with Durham Public Schools that will support students who have an interest in nursing and allied health in their formative years in high school, that will set them up to be able to earn an associate's degree at Durham Tech. And our faculty here at Duke will be offering some of their time and expertise. We are working on partnering around equipment so that students in those programs can work on real life scenarios that they would encounter if they were to work here at Duke. And then also thinking about how to provide them opportunities to transition from student to professional and work at a place like Duke. So those are the kinds of collaborations and purposeful partnerships that I think are most meaningful and that really excite me, because it does exactly what you said, which is really thinking about starting at that early stage youth and helping to spur and nurture that interest. And there are all sorts of reciprocal benefits of doing that, but then ultimately helping folks move along the pathway to sustainable employment in fields where there are a lot of opportunities for growth.
Mm-hmm. So what makes you feel most optimistic about as you look forward? What are the things we're launching or about to launch? What are some of the things that have you most enthusiastic and excited?
Well, I was going to start with the students. I was having a conversation about this recently, and the thing that excites me most and really gives me optimism is looking at students in Durham, whether they're students in our public schools or in our community colleges or at Duke or North Carolina Central, the fresh ideas that are coming and the innovation and how that can be married with the experience and the history. That's really what excites me. And as I think about how it applies to the work we're doing, I think we have a real opportunity now. We're working with the city and county on something called Youth Works. And again, it's about exposing young people to the opportunities that are right outside their doors. I will not forget that back, I guess it may have been 2019, and I was talking to a young student at Lakewood Elementary who shared with me that they had not even been exposed to careers that we would take for granted that are right out in RTP or in downtown Durham. And so to be able to be a part of providing and supporting opportunities for students to have that exposure and to know that they can be a nurse at Duke or be involved in life sciences, that's what excites me. And to be able to do that together with community partners is the best way to do it.
Great. Well, I guess now is as good a time as any to open the floor to questions here. Yes.
Thank you. I applaud what you're doing and I preface what I'm saying here as an 83 graduate. I know how bad town gown relations were. I was a member of APO, which was the community service fraternity, which we started in the early 80s. And we were one of the few groups that was doing anything in the community. We had no administrative support whatsoever. So again, appreciate what you do and how things have changed. the question I have is, I live in Raleigh, and one of the issues that's very important to where we are and what I do in the community in Raleigh is the issue of transportation, the issue, and particularly right now, we've seen, the connectivity issue, and now we're talking about commuter rail, which is a major issue in terms of funding, as you know. And when two of the members of the county commissioners were in our class, so we're, you have that close relationship, obviously, with Heidi Carter and Wendy Jacobs. Duke's role with light rail, it's probably, some people consider it the death knell to Durham Orange Light Rail. So I really want to hear from you what your concerns and thoughts are about regional transportation moving forward, which is a real issue for a lot of folks, particularly, and folks who need those services, who can't afford otherwise to get around.
Well, thank you for your comments. Transportation is an important issue, not only for the community, but for Duke. And I think Duke has been a long-term partner in working with the city of Durham in particular to subsidize transportation, largely bus transportation through a program called Go Pass. I came to Duke right as the light rail conversations were sort of culminating. But I have the privilege today to sit on the Go Triangle board. And part of the reason why it was important to me to do that was to really be at the table and involved in those conversations, and to really think through with community partners how Duke could be instrumental in supporting regional transportation, because as you well pointed out, we've got to think about this regionally for us to really have the best model for the future, because these things take so much time to develop. So I'm hopeful about commuter rail, but the biggest challenge with commuter rail, as I'm sure you know, are cost. And when you think about the tax base and the resources available, there's a differential between Wake County and Durham County. And so really trying to put the puzzle pieces together to figure out how can that rail come through Wake County and through Durham County, it's a complex challenge. And a lot of folks are working on it. Go Triangle, the counties are trying to think through those issues, but it's gonna take some real creative thinking and some resources to bring to bear. And I'm hopeful. We're in the stage, we've just finished up the public comment period. And so now the teams, local municipalities and Go Triangle are trying to work through the mechanisms to really see if we can get that mode. But even with that, we have to have a multimodal system. And so we'll continue to be involved. Duke will continue to be involved in various issues, buses, trains, bikes, which are, is another key element in Durham.
And I'll just add on this front, as someone who parachuted at the very end of the area of light rail, I know that Duke is portrayed as having killed light rail. I'm personally viewed as having killed light rail. That's not the case. But what is the case is that 20 years were spent trying to put together a regional transportation plan that ultimately turned into that light rail project. And the railroads never signed on. It was complicated. It just ballooned in terms of expenses. And it reveals, I think, some challenges in this region because there is no real regional thinking, right? You have counties, and Wake and Durham are the most critical counties to have on the same page because of that 40 corridor where most of this is happening. And we have to get out in front of it. We have to make investments. Some of this is an interest in grabbing federal dollars that kind of becomes a tail that sometimes wags the regional planning dog, to be honest. But it is complicated and made even more complicated by just the demography of this region because we don't have dense urban centers. Raleigh is as close as we come, but it's not like Charlotte, which is more of a conventional downtown. You can build a hub and spoke, and Mecklenburg is one county. So there's a lot of regional coordination required. And what Stelfanie is doing and what Duke is attempting to do is be a partner and convene the right people. And my hope is that we can make investments, if not in commuter rail, then in some viable means of public transportation that connects, especially Wake, Raleigh, and Durham as centers. And I say this as a person who commuted to work for 12 years by regional rail. Its absence in this area is a challenge. But I'm agnostic. If it's bus rapid transit, if it's rail, if it's commuter rail, light rail, whatever that plan is, it requires these entities to get on the same page and move forward together. And Stelfanie has been a real thought partner in trying to do that.
Thank you. Kelly Witter, also class of 83. And I'd like to speak to education, but first to Stuart's point on the transportation, knowing that you're on the board. I would love to see a bus from the bus station to the airport. That would be so easy. And we wouldn't need any light rail. And also a shout out to Heidi Carter, our classmate, who is now a county commissioner, but is also, she was the chair of the school board. Thank you for all you do in your office. I was friends with a neighbor of Phil's. I've worked with David Stein for decades and with the Boost program with Douglas. And I like to consider myself a community partner. So thank you. And y'all were great last week at the Science for All Summit, which was basically a DEIA summit for the whole community. And it was amazing. What I would like to say, I have a suggestion for being impactful and really making a difference in Durham Public Schools. I say this as an alumni, as a Durham resident, and as a Durham Public Schools parent. I had 3 kids graduate from Durham Public Schools. And some of the things I saw were that Duke faculty and Duke administrators, there's very few of them other than the Fresh family that send their kids to Durham Public Schools. They move to different towns, they send their kids to Durham Academy, or they send charter schools. And I'm really passionate about this. But I really feel like the way Duke could make a difference is encouraging higher level employees to send their kids to Durham Public Schools. And I did meet with someone in your office about it in February 2020, and then things changed. And so, but I just like to see that incentivized. Because, you know, if your kids are at Carrington, Northern, you don't have the support. And that's a real boots on the ground thing. So, and I'd love to talk to you later, and we can set up a meeting at some point.
I'd love to talk to you too. I want to say thank you for all that you're doing. Just listening to that list, it's impressive, and I'm grateful that there are folks who are affiliated with Duke who are out there and helping be a part of the community. I hear you. I've heard this from others. And one of the things that we've worked with Human Resources here to do is to try to, as a part of orienting new employees, to make sure that they have good information about Durham Public Schools, because we have a really good school system and they're getting better every year. And, you know, you look at the strategic plan and the improvements in local public schools and the great programs. We just had a student, I guess 2 weeks ago, who competed in the Durham Regional Spelling Bee out of Durham and will go on to compete in Scripps. There's so many high points. And so we are trying to be a conduit for sharing that good information so that folks who work at Duke can make the best choices for their families, but do it understanding that we have great options here in Durham. And I'd love to catch up with you.
This has been a great conversation. Thank you so much. As we all know, Duke is an institution of privilege that has had so many resources in so many different ways over the years to make it the great institution that it is. And we live in a community with North Carolina Central University that's suffered for many, many reasons, the lack of resources that Duke hasn't had. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are and your experiences recently have been and future thoughts about how Duke can be helpful to make North Carolina Central University a stronger institution. Thank you.
So I'll just say that there are conversations happening at every level of the institution. Since I've been here, we've had a great opportunity with President Price, with Chancellor Johnson Akinleye there at Central, to have conversations at a leadership level about how the institutions can enhance our work together, but also all across the campus. The Center for Translational Sciences is one great example, working with the life sciences programs at North Carolina Central. Often our student groups here on campus work with student groups at North Carolina Central. There's a lot of collaboration happening. Where I think we have opportunities are to really scale the best of those and to really think about common interests. I had a recent conversation about programs or fields that their students are studying, but having a hard time finding employment that might be employment opportunities at Duke. And how do we build that sort of talent opportunity from Central graduates into employment at Duke? We have great internship programs that are sporadic across the campus, but how do we scale those up in a way that's much more meaningful? And so what I'm excited about is I think we have lots of ingredients that we can really begin to think about how to do this more purposefully. And hopefully we'll move in the direction that you're suggesting, because you're right. We need to work together. This is a college town, and we have these great institutions less than 3 miles apart.
Yeah, and I'll just say the leadership teams at both campuses get together. We have lunch, and it's not just at the level of myself and Johnson sitting down, Johnson Akinyelia, but our chiefs of staff, the various vice presidents. And it has been interesting because there are a lot of nice and somewhat innovative programs that get started. The sustainability question has always been the challenge, but there are some bright spots, particularly in the areas related to life sciences, student preparation, internships, as Stelfanie added. The other thing is faculty partnerships that are emerging that align research interests of the faculty at NCCU with those at Duke. And when I visited Kannapolis recently, this is outside of Charlotte, they're building a research campus there, and we have a very large program that is gathering clinical data from rural parts of North Carolina. And I sat down and met with the faculty working there, and it's an interesting mix of Duke and NCCU faculty. A little bit further away at NCA&T, we have recently obtained some grants to do some fascinating work in engineering the microbiome that are really deep collaborations of the faculties at both institutions. So a lot of work to be done, but a tremendous opportunity. I think that we have in this region such tremendous educational assets. And as Stelfanie said, just right here in Durham, 2 outstanding institutions. So partnerships really can make a huge difference.
Hello, my name is Paula. I'm also class of 83, and I want to echo the comments how wonderful this program has been. My question is, having been a past college and career counselor at a public high school in California, I wanted to find out how students at Duke get involved in the community. I'm familiar with the program Duke Engage, but I was curious how not just freshmen, but also upperclassmen are able to get involved, in the Durham community. Thank you.
Yeah, this is a great question. I'm glad you mentioned this because we really didn't talk about that much. But right now, students get involved in a lot of ways. One of the key areas is through service learning. We have about 500 students a year that actually volunteer in some format with Durham Public Schools, most of which are tutors. And they're either going through service learning opportunities or they're working through programs like one we have in our office called America Reads, America Counts, where they're actually tutoring students in reading or in other subjects. But about 500 students a year, that's pretty significant. Again, the challenge, and you sort of touched on it, is how students figure out how to get there. And so one of the things that we're trying to put in place now, and we have a steering committee of representatives from across the academic schools, is a center for community engagement. My hope is that this can be a hub to better network the various ways that students access volunteer opportunities, whether it's Durham Public Schools or otherwise. But creating that hub, I think, is really important because students have a lot on their minds, and right now they just, they form their connections either through their academic schools or through a program that they're already exposed to, and they may miss out and not be able to really navigate the variety of opportunities that are in the institution. So I'm hoping that this center, pulling together the network of resources across the schools and across the institution will be a way to better facilitate that.
And the other thing that your office has been doing at early stages, but trying to build the knowledge capacity, frankly, to understand what's going on and who is already engaged, so that we don't continually reinvent the wheel, but can lean on existing relationships and partnerships.
Yeah, this is something we hear quite a bit. You know, there are community organizations that want to partner with Duke, but they may be getting calls from various aspects of the university, and they're going to say yes, but it may be somewhat burdensome. So for that reason and others, one of the tools that we're working on is a partnership platform, which we hope will be launched later this year. And this will be a data visualization of partnerships or touch points between Duke and communities in the Triangle region, where folks can go in and, you know, if you're interested in seeing what Duke is doing in housing, you can query that information, see those programs, see the outcomes. It overlays to census tracts and neighborhoods. You can also pull up publicly available data on those neighborhoods to try to understand if we have housing programs, for example, in a particular area, what do the housing data look like in that particular area? So this partnership platform, we think, is a really important tool to bring that information together and to take what's happening in real life all across forums and put it in a place where folks can access and use that information to make good decisions.
I'm class of 78 and 81, and I actually work here at the Nasher as well. And I sure hope you know about our dementia program, Reflections. And we are working with all kinds of Duke students. There's faculty at the Rubenstein, the head of the MFA program, Sarah Wilbur, who brings us 50, 60 students every semester. She teaches this community class where those kids are volunteering with us with our Reflections program here. We see hundreds of clients a year that come to the Art Museum, and we provide a very stimulating program for them, but we use a lot of Duke students, and the kids are amazing. So these Duke kids are neuroscience majors. They didn't even have that, right, when we were at Duke. They're triple majors in science and math and arts, and they work in art museums, and they work in laboratories, and they work in the community. So she's really involved in dementia-friendly Durham. So there's a community outreach in Durham. There's a senior center, and Professor Wilbur is down there. She's showing up at these Durham meetings. So I applaud her, and I applaud the Nasher and my boss, Trevor Schoonmaker, for supporting this program, because it's a terrific outreach, and you should all know about it. How's that?
It's certainly an exemplar. And, you know, that really is the beauty of Duke. There are so many great things happening that we should all be proud of as alumni of this institution. And there's so many opportunities for us to contribute even more. And so one thing that I did want to share is that if there's interest in, you know, partnering or figuring out other ways that you can be involved, that's another way that our office hopes to serve and support you all.
Absolutely. So I hope you can see just how fortunate we are at Duke to have a vice president for Durham Community Affairs like Stelfanie Williams. Thoughtful, strategic, committed. More to come on this front. I'm also grateful that all of you are here. You're here because you care about the ways that our university community connects to the Durham community, and more broadly to North Carolina. When I came to Duke, I remember I was with a group of alums. And as you know, we're a global institution, an international university. But one of these alums introduced himself and said, you know, I'm a native of North Carolina. Lived in North Carolina my whole life, except 4 years when I went to Duke. You know, it gets a laugh, but I thought that can't be our tagline, right? Because we need to be of North Carolina. We need to be of Durham. Understand that when our students move here, when our faculty move here, they're joining this community, and they're invested in it as citizens and community members. And I feel that that's really happening. And also that longtime residents of the region feel that Duke is their university, that they can share it. And I feel that here at the Nasher, walking through the gardens on a weekend. But it takes concerted effort, it takes energy, and more than anything, it takes real leadership. And I am so grateful to Stelfanie. So thank you again so very, very much.
Thank you, and thank you for your leadership.